A Chinese saying states that women hold up half the sky. In a speech to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Ronnie Fite added, "We can hold up our half better if we own the ground we stand on." For more than 2 centuries, women in the United States have been seeking equal footing on that very ground as a means to achieve success. The perseverance and pioneering spirit of early entrepreneurs laid the groundwork for creating phenomenal opportunities for women business owners today. In 1777, Mary Catherine Goddard, a publisher and the postmistress of Baltimore, printed the original Declaration of Independence. Nearly a century later, during the Industrial Revolution, women were allowed to own property, negotiate contracts, and gain some access to capital as states began codifying the rights of women. At the turn of the 20th century, the growth of female literacy, coupled with increasing educational opportunities, created a storm of activism among women in America. The need for workers brought on by World War II gave many women new employment opportunities, adding over 6 million women to the workforce. With the creation of the Small Business Administration in 1953 and the landmark Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, the timing was ripe for women business owners to stake their claim on the map of corporate America.
Back to the 70s, an incredible time of evolution and revolution.
Back in the 70s, it was a pretty lonely time for women in business.
I started my business in a vacuum as women were just plain invisible.
Now, when I'd say to a person in a corporation that women were economically disadvantaged, they didn't know what I was talking about.
There was no such thing as access to capital for women business owners.
We were a whole generation of women entrepreneurs really without mentors or role models. We didn't know what they were supposed to be.
And there was just no place in the country where you could go learn how to run a business.
And it really was not until the 1960s, 70s, and 80s that there really came to be a women's business movement.
The Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974 effectively removed the last vestiges of coverture and is often cited as one of the most important factors in the growth of women-owned business. Married women were now guaranteed the right to credit in their own names, a tremendous improvement in access to credit for women business owners. Born out of the rising consciousness of women in both the political and economic arenas, the National Association of Women Business Owners, NAWBO, was founded in 1975 to reflect this growing influence.
There was always somebody in our group that knew how to do something. Something that was needed, somebody could figure out how to do, or knew somebody that knew somebody if they didn't know them directly.
They established a presence on the Hill and made friends with congresspeople who eventually began to support what was going on.
Up until that point, there hadn't been a unified voice, and we didn't have a platform of issues. And even more importantly, our constituents, women business owners, didn't realize the significance of banding together, of working together, and of providing a unified voice on the Hill.
And the joke at the time was, as we were working on getting involved with the mainstream business groups, and this, by the way, was a very conscious strategy, that we were going to get some of our leaders from around the country involved with all of the mainstream business groups. But our code name for that was the Velvet, Silk, and Pearls Guerrilla Infiltration Tactics. And we dressed, you know, the opposite of the bra burning that had been prevalent, you know, the decade before.
And not until 1977 were women-owned businesses first counted by the federal government in the census. And even then, it was only part of the women-owned businesses, not all industries and not C corporations.
The SBA published something called the State of Small Business. And in that publication, they said that women owned very tiny businesses. No one had gross annual receipts of more than $10,000 a year. And all of the women entrepreneurs basically made macrame in their basements. And we knew, and they thought all women-owned businesses were sole proprietorships. Well, I knew just from fellow NAWBO members that that was not the case.
Women were not supposed to like money or care about money. And so it was really a breakthrough for this new emphasis on women in business to change consciousness.
President Jimmy Carter's Interagency Task Force on Women's Business Ownership was established in 1978.
And the task force determined that it would hire a staff and produce a report. And that report was a blueprint for everything that followed.
As the decade came to a close, President Jimmy Carter signed Executive Order 12138, which established the Office of Women's Business Ownership at the SBA.
We're not doing women a favor today. I think we're doing our nation a favor.
The office became the cornerstone of influence for women business owners in Washington.
We had very ambitious plans, and we immediately asked for certain things that we had never even thought of before. The SBA was putting in a procurement automated source system. This was a computerized listing of people who wanted to do business with the government. We set out what we thought maybe was an outlandish goal to add 15,000 names of women-owned businesses to this past program. Much to our delight and surprise, I think, that was easily accomplished, and it went way past that.
Once the business census began counting women-owned businesses, they became real. Hard numbers were difficult to ignore.
Numbers gave us a dignity, actually. They brought us up to a whole new level where people looked at us differently. In fact, one banker once said, when the numbers came out, he said, you know, this is going to change how we do business from now on.
Numbers are key to changing the environment. Counting of the women business owners changed how we do business.
We then decided to create the National Foundation for Women Business Owners, now the Center for Women's Business Research. And its mission was to start looking at research about women-owned businesses in a much more strategic way with some random samples to really start making the case with the numbers so that we could tell the story.
Even after the emphasis on data, there was little media coverage of what was going on in the woman-owned sector of small business.
If women entrepreneurs got covered at all, it was always in the women's section of the newspaper. What we lusted after was to be covered in the business section.
Then, leaders in NAWBO decided the only way to establish credibility was to take a leap onto the national stage, using the 1986 White House Conference on Small Business as their platform.
We heard at the time the chief of advocacy at SBA say, oh, NAWBO's not anything to be concerned about. Women are probably not going to be there. This isn't a women's thing. And that just annoyed us to no end. It was one of those things where, oh yeah, watch this.
And so we began training women across the country on the issues, and we trained them how to run to become a delegate. Our goal was very simple. Our goal was to have more delegates than any other organization.
We considered that our Apollo project, the equivalent of putting a woman on the moon. Hager's firm did just a majestic job getting the coverage, and that really, really put us on the map.
We'd done our homework, we had our issues, we had an issues booklet, We were front page Washington Post, front page New York Times.
That was basically designed to give us credibility as a constituent, to make everybody realize that a movement, a transformative movement, had happened in the United States.
I really saw a whole new world that I never knew existed, and a door that I never knew was closed, and that was the door to public policy.
While women considered the issues, they knew how important health care was to their business, they knew the impact of taxes, what they didn't know is that they could do something about it. That if they got together, if they understood the issues, and if they understood how to talk to their senators, to their House representatives, that if they all made a concerted effort together, that their voice would be heard.
We really looked ahead for where we thought things needed to be for capital, for education and training, for international trade, and we staked out issues that nobody else was paying attention to.
The result of the White House Conference on Small Business became the core of the 1988 Women's Business Ownership Act, symbolically numbered H.R. 5050, and introduced by Representative John LaFalce.
Very, very little attention had been paid to women-owned businesses. And so I said, the very first thing I'm going to do as chairman is have a series of hearings to explore both the problems and the potential of the women business owner community.
Jillian Rudd created H.R. 5050. She met with Congressman LaFalce, who was head of the Small Business Committee, and he agreed to hearings. And Jillian came back and said, okay, what do we want?
We knew we didn't want it to be women entrepreneurs as victims.
There was always a sense of advocacy, even from the days that we just got together and met informally.
There were credit issues that we needed to clean up. We knew that we desperately needed to have the government involved with statistics about women-owned businesses. We knew that we needed to address education and training, and then we needed to have a permanent voice for advocacy.
We had large boards, up where we had pins stuck in with, strings, and who was going to be where and what, and who was talking to whom, and I mean, it was from April to June, but it was really 2 weeks in June. I mean, we just stopped everything, our businesses.
That process got quite sophisticated. We got to the point where we really started meeting only with the heads of agencies and with key people on the Hill, and with key press people, and with key trade associations.
We trained all of the witnesses. Susan Chairs, an attorney in Washington, trained all of the witnesses.
It was really important to have people go before Congress that had really good stories to tell, because that was the way that we were going to convince Congress that there actually was a need.
We wanted to have a celebrity witness, Polly Bergen. We knew we had to have a celebrity if we were going to get any members of the House Small Business Committee there.
We tried to pick women, like Christine Bierman, for example, had tried to get government contracts. Also, Phyllis Hill Slater, one of our witnesses, she had government contracts stories, like the door just being completely closed.
I knew then, the fact that everybody came in just for the testimony, I knew that this was something special.
We understood that it was history. We knew that, and we knew that it was much greater than just our businesses, large or small, local or national. We knew that we needed to do this for women.
We assumed we would be successful with H.R. 5050. It was not a question of, can we get this through? We assumed that we could get this through. The question was, what's the best way to do this? What is really the most important to women that's realistic politically?
But all of this was totally coordinated with Congressman LaFalce, Don Terry, and other members. We made it also completely bipartisan, so that we had perfect buy-in from both sides.
Progress had been made by 1987, 1988, but not enough. We needed to rectify the remnants of the past societal discrimination that existed.
The Women's Business Ownership Act passed by a huge margin and was signed into law by President Ronald Reagan. H.R. 5050 established a 3-year pilot program to provide training and assistance that led to the formation of the Women's Business Centers. It also helped provide access to capital by amending the 1974 Equal Credit Opportunity Act to include business loans. The National Women's Business Council was created as a bipartisan federal advisory council to serve as an independent source of advice and policy recommendations to the President, Congress, and the SBA. H.R. 5050 also provided for the expansion of the census data collected and reported on women-owned businesses to include corporations 51% owned by women.
Before H.R. 5050, they didn't even know that we were a new market. They didn't understand that we were an emerging market. They didn't know anything about us.
It set the cornerstone for women business owners to move forward in the 90s and certainly in 2000, and then really filter out around the world so that women in other countries could see what women business owners were doing in the United States and how could they mirror our efforts. How powerful is that?
The fight for recognition and change for women business owners had many voices from many walks of life. Jillian Rudd, described by some as possessing the spirit of an angel with a resolve made of pure steel. Jillian worked tirelessly to change the landscape for women entrepreneurs.
Oh, Jillian Rudd, what a visionary. She brought that vision to reality.
It's really sort of amazing what she was able to accomplish because Jillian never came across as a sledgehammer. You know, she always had just this incredible light sense of humor and very lightness of touch, but she had amazing abilities to persuade.
Jillian was a true lady. She knew how to deliver a powerful punch and yet be a princess.
She vowed that she would never cease to carry those precious gifts that NAWBO had given her: the vision, the entrepreneurial energy, the leadership, and the empowerment. And she vowed that if she had anything to do with it, NAWBO and all women business owners and all of us across this country and across the world would live happily ever after. Thank you.
She looked like they got her from Central Casting. You know, she had the blonde hair with a little top knot, and she was from Europe, and so she had a little accent, and she was just always so proper.
Intellectually, politically, and in every way. She carried herself so well, she was so articulate, and of course, with that English accent that made her appear even more erudite.
I really don't think any of this would have happened without Jillian. She was really the driving force and, you know, obviously a very significant person in all of this.
Jillian is the one, of course, that we will remember the most and with the most love and affection.
And I just thank Jillian from the bottom of my heart.
Since the landmark Women's Business Ownership Act, further strides have been made in areas such as federal contracting and improved access to capital, markets, and training. The National Women's Business Council and its member organizations have led the way for women entrepreneurs.
There are 15 members of the council, a chair who's appointed by the president, 8 individual members, bipartisan, and representatives of 6 women's business organizations. Our mission is to be the voice for the women's business community in federal policy-making circles. And we do that by telling them what's going on, conducting research and bringing facts to the debate on public policy issues, and telling the President, the Small Business Administration, and Congress what the challenges are with the women's business community, what the contributions are, and what needs to happen in terms of policies and programs to help develop women's entrepreneurship even further.
It's a bipartisan organization that is putting out facts, and people need facts that they can trust without spin.
It's a brilliant sort of composite, both bipartisan but also sort of structurally.
We look really for the women and how to help women in this country in business.
Since we're federally funded, we advise, we provide information, but we can't lobby directly.
Not only have we brought the women's organizations and the women business owners together, but we also have involved government, corporations, and academics. And those 5 constituencies have been key to changing the scenario for women-owned businesses.
The resources that the National Women Business Council gives women who want to be entrepreneurs is the courage to take the risk.
We're not afraid to address controversial or new issues, and we are poised to put the influence of our organizations and our businesses behind the policies for which we're advocating.
The Council has really set the agenda and has accelerated the growth of women's businesses.
I don't think it's ever been better for women in business in corporate America today, both women as employees and women as suppliers to corporations.
Capital is freed up a little bit over the last year and a half. Business economics are definitely much more healthy.
Although significant gains have been made, the policy changes that provide for true equality of opportunity are still being established and, in some cases, challenged by today's business climate.
One of the biggest challenges that still remain is women having access to the huge government contracts market.
There's a lot left to be done to make the government a really good customer of women's businesses.
Once we can get the public to really understand and see that women business owners are not even offering health care to their employees as much as men, we can bring that to light and try to help make a difference. And I think the Council can make a huge impact.
There have been efforts to limit the growth of federal programs for women's business development.
This can't happen when everyone is saying that small business is the pulse of American economy, but yet these are the programs they're thinking about cutting.
80% of all new jobs come from small businesses, and many more small businesses are being created by women than by men. And here's where the jobs could come from, and the stability in communities and families would come from. And yet they are the same sector that have this incredible challenge.
It's only through the efforts of the women's business community with the U.S. Congress that's kept funding for the Women's Business Center program, for example, the microloan program, which has really helped a lot of women business owners.
In 2005, we have 105 women business centers, and we are seating 106,000 women a year. With the collective investment from the SBA has been about $37 million, but the economic impact of those centers now in its 2004 year is $500 million. It's a 13, rate of return.
I'm not sure that we have gotten out of government what we can get out of government. And that may not happen until we have more women in Congress, which keeps growing, more women senators.
I believe more and more women business owners will get more active. They'll look at the political process and believe that they can be a player, run for office themselves. Soon, and I believe certainly in the next 15 to 20 years, maybe sooner, we will have a woman business owner in the White House.
They were the beginning of an evolution for now over 10 million women business owners.
To see the women's business community themselves, all the individuals and the organizations, really grow up and to be not operating in isolation, but collaborating with one another, communicating much more with one another, and understanding the bigger picture of banding together has been really wonderful.
myself, like I was in the forest when the tree fell. I witnessed it, you know. This was monumental. I think people take it for granted.
Any woman today, actually, that has an interest in entrepreneurship has it a lot easier because there is access to the Women Business Centers and the SBA and other organizations.
Like running a business, leading a major societal change requires long-term effort.
There is a momentum, and it's like a snowball that we're getting greater and greater skill at communicating. We're getting more and more voices. We can amplify those voices.
It's incumbent upon women business owners and women's business organizations to monitor politics, public policy, to maintain support for women's business programs. And it's only when we're vigilant and when we're watchful and when we work with our elected officials that we can maintain support for women's business enterprise.
I think it is important to remember the past and how we got where we are, but I think it's more important to go to the future. And I think it's more important for the women today to feel the obligation not to honor those who got us where we are today, but to make the commitment to make it sure that it's better for women business owners tomorrow.
So we owe it, not just to ourselves, but to our world, to our children, to our society, to get the best opportunity we can to fulfill our potential.